Hello, this is Paul Cheney with Spartan Design University, where we try and make learning as fun as possible. We're going to talk about responsive design and how we think about it and the process that you could use with several different options. The first attempts to style a web page differently for displays resulted in media equals and these 10 options you see here. They picked 10 which they felt would meet the basic needs of the future. In their effort to be forward-thinking, they created a category of devices called handheld. They figured this should cover all mobile devices. Not only was this never well supported by phone manufacturers or tablet manufacturers, but it doesn't even allow us to differentiate between handheld phones and handheld tablets, let alone mini tablets or whatever else is going to come. To their credit, they did build a media type for print. This is well supported, and I'll demonstrate it later on. They also built another type called screen. We will use a modification of the screen type to target various tablets, phones, and desktop computers. As we discussed in the previous unit, there are two approaches to handling responsive design. We can base it off the reported device width, which has a few problems, or we can base it off the reported browser width, which is much more reliable. Device width is the width of the device when it's in portrait mode. The device width does not change when the device is rotated to landscape mode. Some devices will also support the orientation query, which means you can ask it, are you in landscape mode or are you in portrait mode? However, it's not well supported, therefore it's not very useful. In this example code, this phone would be green because the minimum reported device width of this thing is 320. Even if it's in landscape mode, it's still 320. 320 falls cleanly between 401 and 900, therefore it's going to become green. Another approach is to check the browser width. This approach allows you to fine-tune your design beyond what you could get from just a simple device width. In this piece of example code, we have a minimum width of 400 and a maximum width of 900, and that's going to turn the body background color green. This tablet in portrait mode is 768 pixels wide. In landscape mode, and therefore it's green. In landscape mode, it jumps to 1024. Well, 1024 lies beyond the 900 range, therefore this color is not applied. Once you determine the approach you will use, device or browser, you need to pick a method for your media queries. You can use a CSS link or put them in the CSS file. Here is an example of a link to a style sheet, and this approach is not well supported in old versions of Internet Explorer, therefore I don't use it. However, you should recognize this href call to the tablet CSS as something you'd put in the head of your document. Notice the media query is part of the call to the style sheet. A second way to handle media queries is to have an @media statement embedded directly in the CSS. So in the head of our document, we have a simple call to a style sheet, but in the CSS, instead of starting with some rules, we start off with a media query which specifies a minimum and maximum width. And then this background color green only gets applied, once again, between 500 and 900. Once you pick your approach, device or browser, and you choose a method, link or embedded, then it's time to decide on an implementation. And you can do mutually exclusive, which I don't use, or you can use additive or decorative. A mutually exclusive approach would have the landscape between 0, the narrowest possible non-existent web browser, to an infinitely wide browser broken into multiple sections. Now, I always choose 3 different segments, but that doesn't mean you couldn't do 4, 5, or 6. In this case, we are breaking the landscape between 0 and 600. All rules will apply to any phone device which reports its width in there. none of the rules applied to the phone will affect the tablet. So then we come over to any device that reports itself between 600 and 1024. We design another set of rules that are completely independent of the phone and the desktop. Same thing with the desktop. Anything between 1024 and infinity, those rules get applied there. The problem with this approach is that you're going to be duplicating a lot of code. For example, if your page title is an H1 and the H1 is blue, you're going to have to put that same rule in the phone and in the tablet and in the desktop because there's no overlap between any of these. This is what it might look like. Here we've got a phone with, because it only specifies a max width, it assumes 0. So this is 0 to 499. This one picks up at 500, stops at 1024, and that's got a typo. And then this one picks up at 1025, and because there is no max set, it continues on to infinity. With the decorative approach, you design a beautiful site for the desktop screen. Then you add media queries and you remove stuff that you don't want on the tablet. And then when a phone user comes along, you add some more rules and you hide even more stuff for the phone that doesn't apply to these other two. So you build something, you remove, and you remove. Here's an example of the decorative code. The desktop default would have no media query because it applies to everything. The tablet would have a max width of 1140. The phone would have a max width of 320. Neither one of these would have a bottom limit. So they would specify a max and assume 0 as the bottom. Then there's the additive approach, or you probably heard it called the mobile first approach. You design for the phone first, and then you enhance. So our default CSS is going to be for the phone. So if you have a device that's really old and doesn't even understand anything about media queries, it's going to get the phone version. And then if you have a tablet detected, it's going to start here and add rules or enhance the phone site for the tablet. Same thing with the desktop. You just pick a number, 1,000 something, and you add some more rules or styling that applies for the desktop. Here's what it might look like. Once again, you've got a call to a phone default, which has no media query in it. So if the background color was orange, it would just be a blanket statement. And then in the CSS for the tablet, you would start off with a minimum width and no upper limit. In the desktop version, you'd have a minimum width, and once again, no upper limit there specified either. So in this case, if the background color was orange, here it would be overridden by green, and overridden again by purple. Now, you can use media queries and you can target the landscape as frequently as you want. In my demonstration, I had 3: phone, tablet, desktop. But it's very possible to have phone different from phone portrait and have 2 different style sheets there. Tablet different from tablet portrait with another 2 style sheets, so now you're up to 4. Then you could have a small desktop and then a really large desktop. And then you could divide it infinitely. The problem was at some point you're going to go crazy trying to keep up with all these different designs. Now, back to the media equals print. On the very first slide, we talked about the inclusion of this as a kind of a forward-thinking thing. Here's a website that has basic HTML and CSS, but when you print it, notice it comes out like this. We've changed our font from Verdana, which is great for a computer, and we've switched it to a serif font, which is easier to read. We've removed the header, we've removed the navigation, so this looks much more like a book out of a chapter than that website. So media equals print is useful. I like to use it when I know a website is going to be printed a lot. Now that we've gone through some technicalities, let's look at some web examples and how some responsive sites will look on different devices.